Okay, good morning. Fine class, a good teaching coming your way this morning. Koczanski is teaching this morning from Jeremiah 7 temple sermon. Next Sunday, Julie Georges will be teaching from Jeremiah as well. So looking forward to that. Just a reminder that we've got this prayer list. Let's make sure it goes all the way around and ends up back in Dale's hands. So we're very grateful to have you teaching this morning, Kathy.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Okay, this morning's class, we're focusing on the temple sermon from Jeremiah, which is sort of the keynote part of Jeremiah. It's likened to Jesus's speech at Nazareth at the synagogue or whatever. It's sort of states his main purposes and what he's going to be about. It sums it all up. All right, and so because of that, a lot of today will focus a lot on the text, and I hope most of you have access to text in front of you. I didn't put all of the text on slides because there wasn't enough room. And actually, at one point I thought, you know what would be great would be to just speak it, to just say the sermon and but then I thought my acting skills probably aren't that good. But really it calls for that. I honestly feel that it calls for that. So I'm just going to read some of it. And, the Lord is talking here and he says, and he's talking to Jeremiah, and he says, stand in the gate of the Lord's house and proclaim there this word and say, hear the word of the Lord, all you peoples of Judah, that you entered through these gates to worship with the Lord. So obviously he's making a speech in the temple, or, I go back and forth between Jeremiah and the book of Jeremiah, because Jeremiah is a prophet sent to Judah at a particular place in time. But the book of Jeremiah is for the people going forward. It's for the next people, us, everybody. The book of Jeremiah has a different focus. I mean, an extended focus, let me put it that way. Anyway, so thus says the Lord of God, the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, amend your ways and your doings and let me dwell with you in this place. Do not trust these deceptive words. This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. Saying that as he's standing in the temple. So why would they trust in the temple? That's a real question. Or you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but why would they trust in the temple? Right. They actually had really good reason to trust in the temple. Because this is around 609, something like that, when they're making speech, 609 BC. And if you remember in like 722, the Assyrians had come down and taken away the northern kingdom of Israel. You remember your history, right? And dispersed, so that doesn't exist anymore. They dispersed all the tribes, all that kind of good stuff. And they surrounded, you probably remember the story, they surrounded Jerusalem, right? And they laid siege to it. But then the angel of the Lord appeared and smote down the people, and they went away, and Jerusalem was saved. After all these other things got destroyed, Jerusalem was saved, right? And the temple, so this happened like 100 years before this. So you would think, okay, we live in Judah with the temple, and the temple, the presence of the Lord or whatever, the temple managed to keep the, people away. So yeah, we trust in the temple. Why not? It's a good idea. I wanted to put this in here because I think it's good to keep in mind where the kingdom of Judah was always, and what happened to it all the time. There's, depending on what empire you're talking about, there's always a bigger power to the north, and Egypt's always sitting in the south. And a lot of desert around, so you don't go there. But between the two powers sits all these little kingdoms, and especially Judah and even Israel. They're always there, and they're always getting run over by the powers that be. Because if you're Egypt, you go up to fight whatever's up there. It's a good place to fight, not in your own country, right? Because it doesn't get destroyed. And then if you're one of the other ones, you come down and you go along there. And it's not that Judah's important, although it is a pass-through area, but it's just on the way to everything, and everybody always runs over Judah. So one of the things I want you to keep in mind is that Judah is always vulnerable. The kingdom of Judah is always vulnerable to surrounding people, surrounding powers. It's a little bitty speck. It's not totally an unimportant speck, but I mean, it's probably the size at its biggest. It's probably the size of like 2/3 of Connecticut. That's how big it is. And a lot of times on maps, it makes it look bigger because by the time they spell out Jerusalem, you think, oh, it looks pretty big, right? And some of them had it in big type. And I was like, no, you get it the wrong picture. But just to show you, and this is more like the time period we're looking at right now. But right after that, right in the time period of Jeremiah that we're talking about now, the Babylonians are going to come up, and their empire, is pretty small. And then just to show you, the Persian Empire actually ends up being much larger. And after the Persian Empire is going to be the Greek, Alexander the Great and the Greek Empire, and it's going to be along those same areas there. So anyway, just to, and Judah, not to take too big a detour towards some of the history you get in Kings and whatever, but I'm not sure where I want to go with that. Anyway, it often pays tribute to Assyria. It does various things to keep from getting run over. And you can be the king, and you can pay tribute to the stronger powers, or appease the stronger powers, or make alliances to the stronger powers, or whatever you could do, or take some small powers and make alliances. And a lot of times it allied with various neighbors against this and everything. But that kind of political machinations are running on all the time, and they're running on behind all the things that Jeremiah is talking about. Okay, so now, so when Jeremiah starts off in this particular sermon here, or this particular account of this, the book has put this together as the keynote speech, and he's saying, here you go. For if you truly amend your ways and your doings, if you truly act justly with one another, if you do not oppress the alien, the orphan, and the widow, or shed innocent blood in this place, and if you do not go after other gods to your own hurt, then I will dwell with you in this place, in the land that I gave of old to your ancestors forever. Will you steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely, make offerings to Baal, and go after other gods that you have not known, and then come and stand before me in this house, which is called by my name, and say, we are safe, only to go on doing all these abominations? Has this house, which is called by my name, become a den of robbers? All right. So, notice that these are kind of 10 commandments almost. Some of these the accusations are about. We have both the justice and these. So how many of these sins are unique to 6th century BC? Offerings to Baal, right. And maybe go after other gods. They're more there. But the rest of them, when you're looking at them, you're like, And even from the previous piece about oppressing the alien, the orphan, and the widow, and shedding innocent blood. That's not really, that's still going on. The justice, the lack of justice, the idea that to oppress the alien, the orphan, the widow, is to take advantage of the people that can't defend themselves, or just power plays. Sometimes we express things differently now than we did then, but a lot of the sins are the same. We just sort of explain it differently. Like in the Greco-Roman world, you would have said that the reason Putin is trying to take over Ukraine is because of lust. That's how they would have phrased it. We might phrase it power. We probably wouldn't use the term lust, but you can see it's sort of the same impetus, all right. And also, let's go down to this. Has my house become a den of robbers? Ring a bell? Ring a bell? Everybody? Ring a bell? How does a temple become a den of robbers? And how does it keep happening over and over and over again? That's a question too. Anybody want?
They still have the same system where they would come and possibly buy an offering that we hear about later. Just a prelude to Jesus' temple.
Right, to Jesus, people being money changers in the temple, could have been.
It reminds me, I think it's in the John Wick movies. There's a hotel that you can go to, no matter what terrible crimes you just committed, you can go to that hotel, and it's like a safe place. There's no fighting, nobody can take revenge. You can get a nice warm bed and a hot meal, and it's your safe place. And it feels like the temple was sort of becoming that for all of those, especially in leadership, who are committing the injustices and these other sins, that the temple was sort of their safe place. And it's where they felt like, all's right with the world. We still have this amazing place, we'll always be protected, and nothing's going to happen to me because of it. Right.
So it erases, it negates what you've done in the other life, rest of your life. You can just go and be safe there. It's a good point. I hope people heard that. Yeah, Anne.
When I started training, when I first became a trainer a couple of years ago, I remember I had a client, and he was a Jewish gentleman, and he spoke, there's something that his rabbi said, and that he'll always remember it. And it was, you can sum all the commandments up into one commandment. And the commandment was, thou shalt not steal. Because it's all about actively taking away somebody's honors, the truth, somebody's justice, somebody's life. So the concept of robbing, it's sort of, it's very, and I thought about it, and it's very, very inclusive.
Yeah.
So it seems like the fact that it's a den of robbers,
right,
has that inclusivity,
And that's a great point, because everything's sort of stealing. And why do people steal? Okay, why do people steal? Why do some people want more than other people?
they're afraid.
Because they're afraid.
They're afraid of the lack that they're going to experience.
Okay, they're afraid. Greed. Some people want more than the other people. That's a good point. Some people like to get measured by how much they have. People like to be great. I'm not going to answer all those questions, but but what I want to do is just is pull out and understand that that while the trappings are different, the emotions behind them are the same probably as we have today. We just express them differently. All right.
One reason, fundamentally, the base of all those things, people do not trust God. I mean, if you run down into this, if you trust God, you will not ordinarily steal unless your life absolutely ends up in that moment. Your kids need something to eat. Otherwise, you will not steal if you trust God. You will not commit adultery if you trust God. The whole list of you will not murder if you trust God. I mean, it all goes to the fundamental act of trust in God. And it doesn't surprise me that the temple becomes a bit of robbers, because religious places always become pits of robbers. I mean, not every, most religious places do not, but way too high a number of them do. And so something unique is probably going on, something specific here. But all you have to do is look at TV religion and just the massive amounts of money going into that, going into mega churches. For me, I'm thinking unsurely that dinner robbers.
Right. No, yeah, lack of trust of God, but I think it's true that if the temple has any power or riches at all, if any religious place has riches or power, it is an attraction to people to use it for their own gain and not for justice or mercy or things like that. It just, and because if you look throughout history, it's just a constant that if the church or religious things becomes powerful, it's an attraction for people, and they trap it in religious phrases, but it's really a den of robbers. That's all you have to say. Okay, so he goes on and he says, as an example, it's like, don't you remember what happened at Shiloh? And just as I, just as I cast out all of your kinfolk from Ephraim or Israel, these things are going to happen to you. As an example of that. Now, sorry, I'm trying to think of two thoughts, because one thing is when he says, remember Shiloh, and you guys go, I do too. You're like, oh. I mean, but if I say, remember, the Twin Towers, you're going to go, okay, big image, it's going to pop into your head and all that stuff. And so, for some of these people, what the problem when we read the Bible and it says these things, we don't have a feel for it. They're just flat names. Anyway, so saying, remember what happened in Shiloh when that was during the period of the judges, when the tabernacle had resided in Shiloh. And
geographically, probably very close to where
yes, thank you. Yes, very good. It's geographically close, so it's not like I'm just hearkening back 100 years, but anyway, they would have said, wait, we aren't Shiloh, we aren't Israel, we're better than they are, or maybe we're just the protected ones, or maybe they just, don't care. But he's saying that, anyway, let me go on that. Do you not see what they are doing in the towns of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? The children gather wood, the fathers kindle fire, and the women knead dough to make cakes for the Queen of Heaven, and they pour out drink offerings to other gods to provoke me to anger. Okay, family worship. Here we go. From youngest to the oldest, everybody's involved. Why? I mean, if you know your Old Testament at all, you know that worshiping other gods has been a big problem. It's been a big draw. So why were they constantly pulled to offer sacrifices and worship to other gods? You have to do some imagining. You have to say to yourself, okay, what would make me go after or want to, worship or pay homage to other gods?
Maybe the single God wasn't responding.
Yeah, maybe you didn't feel like God was responding.
And the other nations are looking towards the other nations and think, why are you successful, Lord?
Exactly. You look at other nations, and if things are going well for them, then maybe their gods are doing well. Because the book of Jeremiah is not really going to say, all other gods are just junk. That's not really the point that they're making here. The point is that you're supposed to worship Yahweh. But to the point, if other countries are doing well, maybe their gods are better.
Hedge their bets.
Hedge your bets.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too. There's it feels like all I do is watch movies and TV. But in there's a series about dragons. House of Dragons is one before. Anyway, they're always swearing. I swear by the old gods of the new.
Mhm.
It's a way of just covering all the bases, hedging all your bets. That,
Right.
Whatever God there is out there, I swear by that God, old and new.
Right.
And it feels a little bit like that here. That let's just make sure.
Yeah. It's not like they're not doing sort of temple Yahweh things, but they're always doing other things. There's also, I think a lot of it, let me see if I have this slide here. Yeah, okay, I almost didn't put this in here because it makes it look ancient. And it is ancient, of course, but you might look at this and say, those are ridiculous. They kind of look silly. I would never never worship such a thing. All right. But I decided to put it in there, visual aid and all that good stuff. Besides, I've always been fascinated by these Judean pillar figurines because they're in Judah, for goodness sakes. They're in the whole area around there. But they're particularly in Judah. Okay, you could say, well, we excavate a lot in Judah, so maybe that's how we find these things, because we excavate there. I wrote a whole paper on it once. I did a deep dive into these guys because it's just because I just love having a sort of a physical evidence of some of the fact that it looks like a lot of these figurines were spread out, and you find them particularly from the 8th to the 6th century. In Judah and Israel, but especially in Judah, so it's sort of, and at a rate that they're probably like in the household usage, and they're also were obviously painted on the front and not the back, like they sat on something or in an alcove or in a place, but they have them, right there in their house. And one of the things that struck me about all this thing is fear. One of the reasons you do, whatever you do is out of fear. We were talking about, that you fear that it's not going to be enough or that things are going to be better. And Judah is always vulnerable anyway. They're vulnerable also to natural disasters. I mean, whole area is prone to, natural disasters happen a lot. Fires, earthquakes, things like that. But also, you know, nations, you never know who was coming, and the fear and the chaos, you know. And I contrasted this, you just, you know, we've just did a long bit in Ruth. And to me, Ruth is the contrast to this sort of thing. Ruth is in the chaos of the famine and death of the husband, death of all the protectors. So you're just widows and you're vulnerable and all that stuff. And Ruth is about, you know, justice pretty much, and being just and merciful, and how that turns out versus how, you know, this turns out. All right. If you want to know any more information, I have a nice paper on this if you'd like to know.
One thing, how did it differ from other figurines at that time? These, were they different, you know, because they were Judean? Is it kind of similar?
It's kind of similar. They're about 6 to 10 inches tall. Oh, and also, it's not just always personal with worshiping other gods in your country. It's also, it's not like, well, you know, I choose to have these, but my neighbor doesn't. There's a lot of pressure. There's peer pressure. There's pressure from other countries. There's, you know, if another country is looming over you and you want to appease them, worshiping their gods is going to help. Not doing your own thing in defiance of them. They're going to try to put their stuff on you. And so, and in addition to that, it's also a business. Some of these show examples of how the base might have been one thing, but the heads were cast out of molds. So you end up understanding that this whole process, like your Den of Roberts, I mean, the whole process is a business going on too. You know, somebody's trying to sell you these things. You know, if you don't, you know, support the process. And there's also trade going on. I mean, a lot of people put it really strongly on political things. It's like, you know, that's how you're a vassal of Assyria at the time. You pay tribute to Assyria, which they've been paying tribute to Assyria for a while now. And so, you know, you have these as part of that. All right, back to the text. Okay. So from the day that I brought your ancestors out of the land of Egypt, I did not speak to them or command them concerning burnt offerings and sacrifices. But this command I gave to them: obey my voice, and I will be your God, and you shall be my people, and walk only in the way that I command you, so that it may be well with you. Yet they did not obey or incline their ear. All right. So God doesn't want burnt offering and sacrifices, right? Thought he did. Didn't I read a lot of verses about that? But the point he's making here is first, before, for a long time before there was a temple or even a tabernacle, or we talked about sacrifices or anything, he's saying, you know, God said, obey my voice and I will be your God, and you will be my people. And so we're not going to need burnt offerings and sacrifices. And now, because remember, we know the future here, which there's not going to be a temple for a while. And is that going to make a difference? You're going to be able to still be the people of God, because the most important thing was not about the sacrifices. And also, you know, obviously, the point here is that you can't do all these horrible things to be unjust and then run in and do religious things and make it all right, you know. All right, if you have your, I don't have a slide for everything, but they, I think I had to take that part out. Yep. Anyway, okay, verse 24, it says, but they did not obey or incline their ear, but in the stubbornness of their evil will, they walked in their own counsels and looked backwards rather than forward. From the day that your ancestors came out of the land of Egypt until this day, I have persistently sent all my servants, the prophets, to them day after day, yet they did not listen to me or pay attention. They stiffened their necks and did worse than their ancestors did. Now, and sort of up to this point, you've had the typical prophet thing where, you know, you say these things and you're trying to get them to repent. But then it takes a turn and it kind of goes back and forth in the text. So it's a little hard because as Chris has pointed out, Jeremiah has some different, it's put together differently. So there's times when he just suddenly talks to Jeremiah, and then there's times when it seems to be later. But anyway, this is sort of a turning point because he's going to say, look, speak these words to them, but they're not going to listen to you. You can call them and they will not answer to you. And you shall say to them that this is the nation that did not obey the voice of their Lord and did not accept discipline. Truth has perished. It is cut out from their lips. So there's not really going to be hope right now. For the people of Judah have done evil in my sight, declares the Lord. They have set up their abominations in the house which is called by my name, defiling it. And they have built the shrines of Topheth in the valley of Ben Hinnom to burn their sons and daughters in fire, which I never commanded, which never came to my mind. I love that one. I didn't ever even think it. Never. What the heck are they doing? What the heck? Are they really having sacrifices? Let me see if I got this next thing. I had to cut some things out. So it says, yeah.
Man, if you interrupt, I'm sorry.
You can.
It's just kind of, so interesting to try to understand, like, why didn't they obey? I mean, it's just counter to any, shall we say, logic, other than maybe they didn't believe. I mean, what choices were there? Why would you disobey?
Right.
So did they not believe?
Yeah.
Something came to my mind with the previous slide. They weren't reminded enough of the history of their people. They forgot where they came from and how they got where they are, which it might not be ideal, but it was better than being slaves in Egypt. And the sacrifices and things, it's like God was pleading with them back then to say, it's not these external things that I want you to listen. And it didn't really say that, but I kind of feel like I want your heart and your faith, and I will be your God and you will be my people.
Right.
But they couldn't let go of their outward things. They couldn't work on their inward selves. It's easier to cling to doing something. That's just what sprang to mind.
Yeah. Oh. One of the reasons I like to look at history over time and really get a feel for it is because we can look back and say, well, they should have just kept on believing, right? If this great thing happened to them, and then how long does it take for a great thing to no longer have that much effect on you? Something really good happens, and how long is your memory? How long does it keep focusing, keep you focused on the, that was great, but that was 20 years ago. Does it still shape you, Robert?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you would mind telling me what chapter you are in here in Jeremiah?
Oh, I'm in 7. Sorry, I apologize for that. I'm in 7 near the bottom, about to, it leaks over into 8. But this idea of human sacrifice is just, for us, this is beyond, beyond the pale. And it probably was probably was more the leaders, it takes off on the idea of giving your firstborn up. And if you give your firstborn up, you'll have more. Yeah, Scott?
What fascinates me about this is that, this was not you may want to think of this as a turning all of a sudden, all of a sudden turn. It's a process. And to get to the point where you're sacrificing your children, that's a process. And when you think of turning away from God is a process. It's done in slow incremental steps. And then you're in a place where you're sacrificing your children. It's astonishing. And it's astonishing to us. God is astonished that they can even get to this place. I guess what I'm saying is, it just didn't happen overnight.
Right. No, it doesn't happen overnight. And also there's never a time that Israel as the people of God did it perfectly. There wasn't a time like, well, that was perfect and then they strayed away. You've seen them in the desert, you heard them grumble, you heard the problems, and yes, they can respond to one great speech and say, we will be God's people, we will do this. You know how that goes. We all make good promises, we all start out well, but but then if you turn and read Judges, you can kind of say that, no, it wasn't very good then, and it's a process. And actually the exile is good for this one. After the exile, we don't seem to have, maybe the world changed too, but we don't seem to have so many offerings of firstborns and stuff like this. Anyway, so just quickly, God loves a good irony, because he's going to say, the corpses of this people will be food for the birds of the air and the animals of the earth, and no one will frighten them away. The land is, and I will bring an end to the land, to the sound of mirth and gladness, for the land shall become a waste. And the bones of Judah shall be brought out of their temples, and they shall be spread before the sun, moon, and all the host of heaven, which they have loved and served, and which they have followed, and which they have inquired of and worshiped, and they shall not be gathered or buried. Death shall be preferred to life. So if you want to worship those, your bones are going to be spread out. Nobody's going to rebury them. And God loves a little irony here for a while. He loves good. And all through this thing, the language just escalates and escalates and escalates. Sorry to end you on a bad note, but let me tell you, Jeremiah, it's a little hard to find the up note here, because it's going to be bad. I would love to, I don't know if this is ever going to come up, but I would love to have a chat sometime about the reforms of Josiah, which is happening right before this, and Jeremiah's having none of them. Josiah makes the reforms, and we don't really have time to go into all that detail, but it's not, we always think I went to VBS, no, I didn't really, but King Josiah's and his reforms and all that stuff, and that's happening. It's just probably happened right before this, and it's not And I was thinking, maybe top-down reforms don't really work too well anyway. I mean, it was better than none, but anyway, that's a hint for another time or another discussion that I would like to have.
Bring this closer to home. Despite all the good things God has done, I think if to bring it to a modern day thing, how long does your New Year's resolution last?
Right,
And that's exactly what's happening. It does, I mean, you don't say, okay, I'm gonna do this, and the next day you don't. You try it for a while, but you slowly don't.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, what happens probably from Deuteronomy on, for the rest of the existence of Israel and Judah, God does these wonderful things, and like a generation of people remember. And then their kids forget.
right. And if you think it just stops when Judah ends or whatever, you're wrong, because we've been talking about how the impetus for all these things are part of our human nature, and it goes on and on. So anyway, time to quit because we're gonna have a prayer, right? Dale's got that, and then we'll back up.
I wrote down unnamed daughter, and I just want to let you know what that is. We were coming out in Manhattan yesterday, and, you know, I